What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down what the news, data, and technicals are telling us about the overall market and also for Tesla, and give you guys a very good preview about what's about to happen to Tesla's margins, their EPS, their data, and their technicals going into their big earnings report, which is just in a couple of days. I'm also going to talk about the overall market, how it may affect Tesla, and once again, what the news and technicals are telling us for QQQ, SPY, and many other tickers. But before I break anything down about this, before I say anything about Tesla, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, whether it's $1 or $100, it's up to you. You're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000, and any could be a free Tesla share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 6 hours from now. Check it out before they run out. There are only 6 hours left. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So anyways, Tesla's up 1.1% for the day, holding up pretty nicely by the end of the day, but we did actually start off very slow when it came to the price action. Now, looking at Tesla, we got a very big pop in the very beginning of the day, but Tesla did fail to break above 190, and we did end up breaking even below 188. Then Tesla started this decline. I did tell you guys about this, just us trading sideways, maybe even pulling back a bit into the opening hours. And then I told you guys that Tesla would likely see a nice bounce, maybe a push up by the end of the day. That is very close to what ended up happening, right? We traded sideways in the beginning. Besides this one very temporary pop in the morning, we just traded sideways, declined a bit. Then we actually saw Tesla push up by the end of the day. And it looks to me like this has more potential to try to push up a little bit more. This is going to be impacted by earnings and also how the overall market performs, but I do believe there is potential for Tesla to try to continue to push as we get closer to its earnings. But before I talk about Tesla, I need to break down some very important information just briefly. Firstly, do not forget that tomorrow we have Bank of America and also Goldman Sachs reporting earnings. Then after the market closes, we have Netflix, United, and many other companies. But the morning is going to be even more impactful. For Wednesday, we have ASML, we have Morgan Stanley, and then we also have IBM and Tesla after the market closes on Wednesday. That's when earnings is coming out. Make sure you are ready for this. This will affect Tesla big time. And typically, as we approach these earnings, as long as the market does not crash, which I don't really believe it's going to crash that hard, as long as we don't have like some unexpected piece of news, but I don't really see the market crashing too hard as we approach Wednesday. And I do believe Tesla has the potential to hold up, if not rally a little bit as we approach the big day. And then whether we continue to rally or not will depend heavily on the information I'm about to present to you in a couple of minutes. Now, what else is interesting about earnings is today we had Charles Schwab came out. Before the market opened, Charles Schwab announced earnings, and they actually did better than expected for the most part. They actually posted a profit of 93 cents per share, beating the forecast of 90 cents per share. So once again, better EPS than expected, but revenue was as expected. Guidance was just okay, not too great, not too horrible. So overall, this did actually help the market. This was more positive for them, and the share price is doing, it's kind of okay right now, not too horrible, not too great. But I did see a lot of whales buying lots of these Schwab calls going forward. They're just buying and buying and buying. So that is a pretty good sign for it. Now, when it comes to the data coming out, just real quick, we have building permits data coming out for tomorrow. That's going to be very important. This will affect how the market perceives the housing industry. I also want to note that what tends to happen during times like this is permits tend to actually see big decreases. We tend to see housing take a big hit. So far, we are not really getting the massive hit we've been anticipating, but it could actually happen sooner than later. So that's why you have to watch this carefully. Lots of housing data for tomorrow. Then we actually have the Fed Bowman speaking at 1 o'clock p.m. Make sure you're ready for that, because when these Fed speakers speak, we tend to see the market slow down a bit. Typically, we'll see how this affects the market going into tomorrow. But overall, the market is still holding up nicely. Now, for Tesla, I have some very important developments. Right now, we only got about 116 million in volume. It still is quite tight, not extremely bullish or bearish just yet. But then again, there is the potential for us to try to push up approaching earnings. As far as the short volume goes, it's on a bit of a decline. This is a pretty decent sign. And finally, if you look at the price pairs ratio, this is actually basing around this previous level, very close to this level, which tells me Tesla might start outperforming the market very close to earnings, maybe even after earnings if they do well. And that is a real possibility given how earnings so far have been actually quite better than expected for the most part. On top of that, Barclays has actually said that Tesla is going to most likely outperform the market. They just said this yesterday. So did Wedbush. They're reiterating that Tesla is going to outperform. And we're actually getting some very good ratings from more and more analysts. Looking at their earnings, they do have a tendency of doing better than expected. Let's hope for that going forward. But remember, their margins and other factors will be very impactful too. Tuesdays tend to be green 51% of the time, so we tend to have decent Tuesdays. And as long as the market holds up, I do believe Tesla will have another decent performance, maybe even a somewhat green day if the market holds up as we want it to. And I do believe the odds favor that, especially as we get closer to earnings. And once again, that's going to be very, very awesome. For the overall short interest, this is declining a bit. When this slows down, we tend to see Tesla do well. And that is what's happening so far. But please note, right before earnings, we tend to see this actually spike a bit because lots of shorts like to pile in and bet against Tesla on these big days. Sometimes they could be correct, but most of the time they are incorrect because Tesla has a tendency of typically surprising many big companies, many big analysts when it reports earnings. Now, for the news, I'm going to talk about a couple pieces of news before I break down earnings, or at least just some data about it. Tesla's battery supplier, one of their biggest ones is actually Panasonic. They're looking for a new factory in the US. This is some pretty good news for us because, once again, as Tesla continues to grow, they're going to need more and more of these batteries. They have actually benefited from the lithium decrease that happened over the last couple of months. This is helping Tesla big time. And their growing partnership is actually helping them supply more and more of these batteries, especially in Nevada. But they are actually working in actually supplying more and more of these factories in different parts of the US. Right now, they're looking at like Kansas. I think there's another place too. Once again, very good news. If it does end up coming out, that's going to just help Tesla. If anything, I don't see that actually hurting them in any way, shape, or form. Now, when it comes to their overall inventory levels, these have actually declined just a little bit. It was at about 566 a couple of days ago. The most recent part I can actually look at is around just under or around like 500, maybe a little bit under right now. They have declined a little bit, but for the most part, they are still on an uptrend, which does give us a sign of slowing demand. How much has demand actually slowed down? Well, they were actually holding about like 73 units just a couple of weeks ago, like 4 weeks ago. They were holding about 70 or so. Now, or very recently, they have closer to 500 for the backlog. Once again, it's not solely because of production that is playing somewhat of a role, but demand is not keeping up as fast as it was before compared to these levels right here, compared to this area right here. So that tells us right now there is a demand issue for Tesla. It's not extremely massive until we actually truly see how it affects earnings. And we'll see how the price cuts actually affect their numbers. Now, on top of that, we had some new data coming out for the EV tax credits. Tesla will, some of their models will actually qualify for them, but not every single one of them. I actually have a list of the ones that do qualify right here. The Model 3 Performance is going to qualify, the Model Y. This is the all-wheel drive and long-range all-wheel drive as well for the 2022 Performance. And also the Model 3, this is the standard real drive, right? So not every single Tesla model will qualify, but most of them do qualify for now. So once again, very mixed, but this does benefit Tesla for the most part, as Elon Musk mentioned before, and I really hope this continues going forward. Now, for their earnings, I want to note that margins are going to be the biggest thing or one of the biggest things to look at. As this analyst right here from Forbes said, they actually noted the fact that the stakes are high for Tesla because if the margins remain healthy, the stock will do quite well. However, if the margins contract, then bears will be in control. So make sure you guys remember that. Now, looking at other analysts, they're actually talking about how many of them are anticipating that Tesla is going to get a hit harder than some people are expecting. That's not a guarantee, but it is a possibility. Many analysts are talking about the fact that right now there are less buyers right now, and Tesla has been slashing prices a little bit too much, so that's going to hurt their margins. That's not a guarantee. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying they're going to just crash or anything, but what I am saying is there is some evidence of this, but we won't know for sure until earnings comes out. Now, there is rising competition. There's a weakening economy. That is technically all true. But once again, it does not guarantee anything. Tesla is expected to report an auto gross margin of 23.2% for the quarter on Wednesday. According to 17 analysts, that's actually down from previous records of 32.9% a year earlier. So we know for sure these are going to likely see declines. We just don't know the exact extent. Some of their margins are actually said to not actually go below 20%, even despite the selling price of about 47,000 across all models. But other analysts are predicting further price cuts and more margin pressure for them. And they do believe that the current situation, the economy, will continue to affect them. They did also mention the facts that there's more evidence of this across the world. If you look at the continents of Europe and also like Israel and Singapore, we did recently see even more price cuts by about, I believe it was between 6% and 11% in total. And that's actually a total of a 20% reduction its base model Y. So some massive, massive reductions have been made overall. And if it continues this way, I will become a lot more concerned about their margins. Now, on top of that, I just want to note that this is what the chart looks like right here. The analysts are expecting the price cuts to actually affect their margins overall to about 23.1%. We'll see if it's somewhere around here. I'm hoping that they don't get hurt too much. But as long as it actually meets expectations, if not, if these numbers are better, they're going to be completely fine. We're also going to be looking at their free cash flow to see how that can actually supply Tesla with a lot more leverage. Tesla has a lot of cash at hand, but we need more data on it to get more verifications of how well Tesla will do. There are also going to be some more updates about their technologies, their products, the full self-driving technology. They may say something about Optimus. I haven't actually read too much about it just yet, but if they do, that's going to be, once again, be very awesome news. It gets many investors excited. People love AIs in this era, and that could actually help the share price. They may make some big announcements about their products, maybe the FSD or not. We'll just have to keep an eye out for that. But for the time being, I don't think that's going to be the biggest concern unless they announce something massive. The biggest thing is going to be their profitability and their margins and how well they're going to be doing and their guidance going forward. Now, for the fiscal quarter ending in March 2023, the consensus EPS forecast has remained the same over the past week at 0.75. Right? It's actually the same as before, so we're actually expecting something like that. Let's hope Tesla beats on it. If they beat, that's going to be some awesome news for us. The last thing making so many headlines is the fact that VW aims to dethrone the Model 3 with its new long range ID.7. I don't know if I said that right, but their new electric sedan, basically, their ID.7. Once again, I mean, I'm going to say it's an awesome car, awesome sedan, completely fine. It's completely fine to say that. But the bottom line is this competition is going to incentivize Tesla to do a lot better. It's also going to push different companies to continue to compete. Now, the thing about Tesla, and this is the thing Elon Musk has reiterated over and over again, Tesla is not trying to become the number one EV on the planet, the EV company. That's not what their number one goal is. Their goal is to actually further the development and the progress of sustainable technology for the future. So that's the reason why I don't really like these comparisons. I know the mainstream media loves to do it. They love to put Tesla in their headlines all the time to get clicks. Just know that that does not matter too much. To me, Tesla is still a great car, and demand it's still relatively high, right? They're still able to actually sell, over 300, 400,000 vehicles per quarter, but it's just not as high as what I would probably want it to be. It's not extremely high like some previous periods of time. That's something we have to actually remember going forward. But other than that, as long as Tesla does decent on earnings, as long as they beat on EPS, the revenue is okay. I think revenue should be fine. I'm not too sure about EPS. And as long as their margins are not hurt way too hard and guidance is pretty nice for Tesla, there is still potential for Tesla to still continue to outperform the market after earnings comes out. Now, anyways, I'm going to talk about the charts. I'm going to try to be a little brief because I think I went over time talking about all the information. Looking at a couple of plays, I just want to note that I'm actually holding some Coinbase calls right now. I actually entered really close to about the 65 area, and the reason I entered is because I saw bullish divergence. I also noticed that it actually held above the 200 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. I was also watching it build a lot of momentum as time went on. And as it continued to go, we actually got this nice retest of this gap resistance. It actually broke above it. And that's once again a very bullish signal. So there's a good chance it's going to just try to keep going. This will be dependent on the overall market, and this goes for every stock out there. It depends a lot on earnings for Bank of America and Goldman Sachs and other factors like that. So be prepared for anything, but the odds do heavily favor more upside as we have a bullish triangle development. And this once again looks pretty nice. So it's just my play that what I'm actually holding right now. For Tesla, how is Tesla looking? I do believe that what I told you guys is very similar to what happened, right? Sideways action, a bit of a drop as the first few hours progressed, more sideways action, then a one last pump to end the day. Tesla closed at 187 of 1.1%. I believe that we're most likely going to see this thing maybe cool off again in the morning, trade a little sideways. Then we're likely going to see another break to the upside eventually. Now, I think the odds favor that, as I did see a lot of whales loading up on those 190 calls. It was very popular today. And I believe that there's a good chance this is going to try to fight for this 190. We have to actually break above 188 in a very strong manner to get all the way up to 190. And if we do get all the way up here, we're going to be watching 192 pretty quickly. The odds do favor a pump approaching earnings, and I still stand by that. But then again, we always have to be prepared for anything because of earnings and other factors. But like I said before, the odds do heavily favor more upside nonetheless. Now, if we're bearish on Tesla, just hypothetically, okay, if Tesla comes down, we're going to be watching this wedge right over here, this support around this 183 area. If that fails, there's 182, then 180 flats. But I don't really think Tesla's going to drop that hard unless something catastrophic happens. I don't really see that right now at the time I'm recording this. So the odds are favoring a bit of a pullback tomorrow, some sideways action, then another push up as the day goes on. And as long as the market holds up, we could see Tesla retest 188, break above that. 190 could come. 190 to 192 around that area could be tested over the next couple of days, potentially 195. Now, when it comes to SPY, as I mentioned previously, okay, there is a bearish signal developing. It's developing, but there's no guarantee it's playing out. What does that mean? Well, when you look at the overall structure on this chart, you will actually see that, and I do apologize, I think my screen is kind of too small. Right here, okay, we saw the chart continue to increase over and over again. We had this nice uptrend on SPY. It's still holding up nicely. But if you look at the RSI and the MACD, we have this bearish divergence. Also, the HYG is also red right now. And what that tells us is that the quote unquote smart money are actually selling this rally. They're continuing to sell off. They don't agree with the market pumping right now. And as the smart money or institutions continue to sell, retail, which are oftentimes referred to as dumb money, I don't really like to use that term, but they're actually buying right now. So that's not a very good sign. And what that tells me is the fact that the market is going to see downside in the future, most likely as we get closer to May, if not during May. But for now, we have some bullish signals, which tells us the market might pump a little more first before more downside comes later on, closer to May, in my opinion. So right now we look more bullish, right? We might push up a little bit more. If we're bearish for tomorrow, we have to watch around this 411 is going to be major support, followed by 408. If we're bullish, we're going to be watching 414. We have to break 414. If we break it, we have the potential to retest the high we made previously and then break above it to get to 416 or so. Heavy resistance does exist up here, and there are lots of bears getting ready to smack us down, though. There's no guarantee it happens immediately, but in the future, I do see that being very likely once I show you some other indicators. But once again, for tomorrow, it looks like we're going to actually cool off in the morning. And then we're likely going to see the market try to fight for this 414. We might just break it and see SPY continue to push up a little more. But what is a little concerning is the dollar index. This thing is still starting to break out. If it gets a clean breakout, I mean, it is still undervalued right now, but it is trying to, push up. We do have a possible inverse head and shoulders that formed on the hourly. If it keeps going, that's going to be bearish for the market going forward. If this thing gets the clean breakout above 103 to 105, the market is most likely going to start topping, and then the market is going to reverse pretty hard because the dollar is once again inversely correlated with the overall market. The dollar is telling us that we have to be careful here, okay? As the market pumps, be very, very careful because the dollar is telling us that a top could be forming soon, right? I'm not saying that we're going to just tank from here. I'm saying that the market is pushing up. It's going to likely try to continue to push up, but we have to be cautious because a top is likely going to form soon and a reversal could come in the future. For Neo, this thing actually did something unexpected. This thing actually held above $9 and it actually pushed up off the Chinese GDP numbers and also because of some bullish news thanks to Xpeng and other EVs to help increase demand and their manufacturing capabilities. And Neo actually did not, this head and shoulders did not play out on Neo like I actually thought it did. So sometimes unexpected things could happen, guys. I'm also a human. I'm not always going to be correct. My analysis and predictions are correct most of the time, but not always. I'm always open to admit that. I'm always open to be honest. And right now, Neo is looking pretty nice. I mean, if it's going to likely retest $10, if it breaks above that, it could try to keep going. If it rejects off of it, we're going to be watching 9.7, 9.5, and then this gap fill to 9.28. The odds are favoring, though, that Neo is going to try to hold up and maybe try to keep going forward. Finally, for Microsoft, this thing is holding up nicely. It's up 0.93%. We have a possible head and shoulders, but it might try to invalidate it by retesting 292. Now, if we're bearish, it's going to come down to about 284. If we're bullish, we're going to get a retest of 292 and try to break it. If it does break, it's going to try to fly for 295. If that's the case, it's going to invalidate this head and shoulders, and that is very likely to happen. I do believe it's going to try to retest 292, but I don't know if we're going to break it or not, so make sure we're very careful. For the QQQ, what I'm essentially seeing is this thing is actually holding up nicely. It's actually holding this support quite nicely. I believe it's going to cool off in the morning, and then it's going to try to get a retest of 320. It's going to try. I don't know if it's going to break it or not. And I do believe that Tesla, during its earnings, could actually influence the QQQ and the overall market. If Tesla does very good during earnings, it could try to pump SPY and QQQ a bit, especially if Tesla does rally, right? So there is potential for the QQQ to actually break above 320. Tesla could help it do that in the future, but we just need confirmation of that move going forward. And until then, I am anticipating a bit of a pullback first and then maybe a retest. Finally, I'm just going to talk about two last things before I talk about Tesla, maybe three more things. The VIX is undervalued. It's just continuing to downtrend. There is a bullish divergence on the weekly, but there's no sign of it actually playing out yet. The VIX is very undervalued. It's in the 16s, might keep declining. There's no sign of a bounce, which is bullish for the stock market. We'll have to just wait and see. There's also a bullish divergence possibly developing. I think it's developing. Yeah, it is developing. We have a bullish divergence that develops, so the VIX might bounce tomorrow a little bit. Maybe the market pulls back a bit, but then there's no guarantee that the VIX is just going to break out from here. It might just get a small bounce and just kind of chop a bit. And that's why I think the market might kind of like pull back a little bit and then try to bounce a little bit afterwards and just hold up. Uh, for Apple, we closed close to resistance, very close to almost 166. If we pull back, we're going to be watching a retest of 163.5. If we're bullish, 166 is going to be retested. We're in the middle right now. I am anticipating it to pull back. It's about like 163.5, then try to rebound, retest 166. And if it breaks it, 168 could come. There's no confirmation of this thing actually failing. It's actually holding up nicely. So the odds are favoring a bit of a pullback, maybe this thing pushing up to 166 and maybe breaking it tomorrow, depending on how things go. AMD might try to push up as well. I say this because of the fact that we're at this resistance, we're holding up nicely, and overall, if it does break out, it could fill this gap and try to retest the 200 EMA. For Google, um, Google is actually just below the 50 EMA on the hourly. If we break above it, I'm going to be watching 107.5. If it breaks that, it's going to likely fill this gap and rally quite nicely. If it fails to break 107.5, it's just going to chop around from there, but the odds do favor it testing that and maybe breaking it going forward. Finally, for the 10-year Treasury yield, this is actually giving me another bearish signal for the markets. It's starting to actually show more and more strength, but it's currently at resistance. Right, resistance is around 36. I want to see this thing maybe just cool off a little bit. If it does cool off, that's going to be bullish for the markets. For the time being, it's holding up nicely. If it cools off and fills this gap and then it tries to bounce later on, that's going to be bullish for the stock market. But if it keeps going, that's going to become a little bit more bearish, and that's going to tell me to be very careful with the market and the highs we're at because downside could still come. We're still holding up nicely. We'll see where this thing goes. Momentum is weakening a bit. It is kind of overbought. So I'm hoping it pulls back a little first and maybe the market pumps a little more. And then eventually this thing starts ripping higher. And that's going to become very bearish for the stock market. We just need more confirmation. And so far, like this is not aligning with SPY because SPY is still looking bullish. We got a nice push up, close just below 414, which is where the resistance is that I had drawn out right here. So I'm thinking we're going to likely see a pullback thanks to the bullish divergence on the VIX tomorrow. We might see this thing come back to like the 412 area, and then it might try to bounce and just chop a bit. And overall, it might try to push near the end of the day. And that's what I'm hoping for, at least hold up. It's going to also depend on the real estate data coming out for tomorrow and also earnings for Bank of America and also the other big banks. All right. So, anyways, thank you all so much for listening. For Tesla, I'm anticipating some downside. It to like cool off a little bit, like I said. Hold up. I think it's going to cool off a bit, then I'll try to hold this wedge area, trade a little bit sideways, and then try to get a rebound either by the end of the day tomorrow or by Wednesday and try to get above 190 to 192.5. Right? I believe it's very likely that's going to happen. And I do believe Tesla's going to get a pump, a small rally before the big earnings. So make sure you are ready. If the rally does not happen tomorrow, a nice rally, if it just closes kind of flat, maybe somewhere in the green tomorrow, then for Wednesday, it's very likely Tesla's going to try to pump to around 192.5 or so by Wednesday if it does not start tomorrow. All right. So, anyways, thank you all for listening. I want the best for everyone. I thank you all so much for listening. I also want to note two last things. I have some merch for you guys, custom merch if you are interested in buying some hoodies and really awesome custom shirts that say to the moon or, for trading and things like that. If you use code SAVE5, you're going to save 5% on your order. And the last thing is, once again, my Webull link down below. If you sign up, deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. This offer ends in just 6 hours from the time I'm uploading this. Make sure you check it out. It's almost over. This is your last chance for this specific offer. All right, guys, thank you for listening. Have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. Remain calm, cool, and collected. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Tesla to the moon because the long-term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.